Okay, so I suppose while we're going through each grower's outcomes with the cover crops is just to think about for yourselves when you're looking at the slides, or for the grower in question to answer is whether any fertiliser was used, whether you had any establishment issues, whether you were happy with the mixed ratio, as in say broadleaf to cereals or a particular plant dominating or anything like that. How far have you got with the crop? Is it early days or is it grazed off or just about to be grazed? If it is grazed, did you notice the sheep or the cows doing anything in particular, eating something first or prioritising something, or did they go for it like a smorgasbord? What was the feed value like? Did you have to add any roughage, all those sorts of things, and any other observations you might have? So they're just some basic questions to either answer or think about, depending on who you are. So we'll head to the first slide. So Carl, do we have Carl or Doug on the line?
No, Doug's trying to get on, but he's having trouble.
Okay, well, we could, it doesn't have to be in any particular order.
Well, let's do Tyler, since we've got him, and we've got Ron, but Jared's having trouble getting on as well.
All right, well, we might chuck Tyler in the deep end, sorry, and go straight to you if you like. So I've put each of your 4 mixes on a slide with the photo. So we're at mix 1 now, Tyler. If you'd like to let us know a little bit about the mix and what you've done with it, if you could.
Tyler, you'll have to unmute your microphone.
Okay, is that all right? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. So, yeah, I've got a few mixes. They're all pretty similar, so I'll fly through them pretty quick if Jade has put them all up. But, yeah, mix 1, I didn't have the exact breakdown of the actual rate, so that's going to be a bit useless for you. But oats, grazing rape, grazing canola, tillage radish, I think it was shafted clover and Berseem clover and vetch. This was on a paddock that was watered up, so it did have a little bit of a head start to the season start, but it potentially got a little bit too wet when we did get that our opening rains at the end of April. Start of April, I think it was. So the sheep have been on there. This is just a 10-hectare paddock, and the sheep have been on there for a couple of weeks. When I say sheep, 500 ewes with lambs at foot for a couple of weeks, and I just made an effort not to graze it down too hard, because last year I grazed it down too hard and potentially lost the tillage radish. And the photos here are 1 week post grazing, so it's reshot a bit. Fertilizer, 50 kilograms of starter zinc star type product, and it did unfortunately get an insecticide, as all of my mixed species did, because I had high pressure of mites, and I didn't really want to just wait around and see what happened, and they were hitting the clovers particularly hard and felt that I was going to potentially lose them. So I pulled the trigger and sprayed them with a broad spectrum knockdown. Yeah. You can just move on to the next one, Jade, or fire any questions at me. But my plan is that I'll let this rebound for a while, and it'll get regrazed when I need the feed, but we'll have plenty of feed in the short term.
Sure, thanks, Tyler. I'll move you on to the next line unless anyone's got any burning questions. Nope. Okay.
Sorry, it's just Felicity. I've got a question about inoculum. So would you have had clover in that paddock before, Tyler? So would you think you would have needed inoculum on that clover?
Yeah, so the clover seed was just bare seed, so it didn't have any inoculant on it. And that paddock there was actually one of my mixed species pasture paddocks last year, which did have clover in it. But again, I'm just trusting that there would be a bit of natural inoculum building up. So because I didn't inoculate it last year either, if that makes sense, Felicity. So when I went digging last year, it looked like there was some nodules on there, but I'm not any expert to say whether they were enough nodules or not. So I'll go looking again this year. And one comment I would make, the clovers are quite, in that mix, it's dominated by the oats and the rape and canola. And the clover probably hasn't really added much bulk just yet. It's just sort of sitting underneath the foliage. And it's definitely there and looking healthy. But the majority of the biomass there's the oats, rape, and canola, and it's been grazed reasonably even in terms of the sheep have concentrated on the oats, rape, and canola. So I'm hoping the clover now will have a bit of sunlight to take off.
Yeah, so I'd encourage you to have a look in like September, well, a bit later in the season, I guess, when the clover starts to fire, and yes, look at those roots again, but also cut the roots open to see. Have you had a look at it at rhizobia or nodules on your other legume crops before? So you cut it open with a knife and then just have a look at the colour, and so the redder or pinker the colour is, the more nitrogen fixing you're getting. So that's what we want to see, nice big fat red nodules.
Yeah, I have done that in the past, so I'll plan on doing that again.
Excellent.
This is pretty similar to the previous one with added of chicory. And subtracting of a couple others. But the main, again, this is like the previous one in terms of using, I'll be looking to use it for grazing sheep. Starter fertiliser of 50 kilograms a hectare. And part of this paddock was watered up, and before I saw the rain forecast increasing and stopped the water. And there's pretty much no difference between what was watered up and what was not. So that was a bit of waste of water at this stage. So adding a bit of chicory and in this one, and I don't have it in the photos, but I trialled a couple other higher rates of chicory and fodder rape and dropped out the cereal component. I just put the oats in there at 25 kilograms to the hectare with the idea to generate quick feed. And they probably dominated the mix. I was surprised at how much 25 kilos per hectare of the oats has caused domination in the mix, if that makes sense. There's plenty of other species there, but probably could have backed it off a bit more. And the idea is later on I'd aim to probably spray the grasses out and let the clovers and chicory and rape continue on. So that's the idea there, and the sheep are on that at the moment.
Lovely. Tyler, it's Jade. With the oats compared to your first mix, roughly how much, you put 25 kilos into mix 2, mix 1, would it have been 10 or 15? Or?
Yeah, so I sowed this before I talked to you and got those numbers off you, Jade. Yeah, so both these got sown, and then I talked to you and we chucked in. Oh, sorry, I talked to you on this and I chucked the chicory in. But yeah, so in the previous one it was 50 kilos to the hectare of oats, and this was 25. And then I think I talked to you and you suggested even less than that, like 10 or something. I can't remember what it was in the mix.
Yeah, okay. So this mix, do you think it's dominating because the bulk of the rest of the mix is a slower species, if that makes sense?
Yeah, potentially. It's definitely there, and I should have grabbed some photos. there is ample feed in the areas that I dropped the oats out completely and have higher rates of fodder rape and chicory. Not that chicory's doing much at the moment to what I can see, but there's a lot more fodder rape. And I did do, like, I was in the middle of this sowing when I talked to you, and I tracked down some turnip as well, and I chucked that in a few bays of the paddock up the other end and dropped out the grasses, and there's ample feed there without the oats. It's just that the oats are the dominant wherever they are, I guess, if that makes sense. So I'm not planning on anyway, we'll see how it goes. The rest of the species are definitely there. You can't really see it in the photo very well, but there is heaps of clover and fodder rape and chicory and turnip up the other end of the paddock that look healthy in the mix. It's just that oats are the majority at the moment of the bulk, I suppose.
Yes, and they get away so fast and they're so upright that it would look that way. Yeah, the photos probably don't do it justice. If you stood into the crop, you can see a lot more of the species, if that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Cool. All right, we'll get to mix 3. Vetch Central, Tyler. This looks pretty handy.
Yeah, so this one left the grasses, any grass species out because I want to spray the grasses out. So I just vetch just off the vetch was 25 kilos. I sowed the vetch at 25 kilos a hectare, and it sort of dominated the mix at the moment. And again, like the others, this got hit pretty hard. This was the worst paddock for the mites at the start of the season. So yes, I ended up spraying them out to try and get those clovers and a little bit of lucerne to survive. But they are there, but definitely you've got to go looking for them. It's the vetch and canola, rape and turnip and tillage radish that are dominating. So, and again, just the 50 kilos of starter, zinc star, and that insecticide spray, and that's all. So, and in terms of the clover mix, I think it was a couple kilograms of shaftal, a couple of kilograms of the Persian, 3 kilograms of lucerne, and then like a half a kilo of the canola, half a kilo of the rape, half a kilo of the turnip, and half a kilo of chicory, half a kilo of tillage radish. Was roughly what those numbers ended up being.
Lovely.
Keeping in mind when I'm, because I'm basically mixing these myself, not in a very accurate manner, and then basically trying to tip them into their one bin of the air seeder card, if that makes sense. The rates are pretty agricultural.
No, that's fine. It's Jaden. With the vetch in that mix, did you see, and the turnip and the tillage radish, we've seen further south the sort of Ballarat and Ararat way that the red leavers might get into the brassicas. Were they just in the clovers and lucerne, or did they cross into your other species?
They were, but the other species seemed to get up and go quicker than the clovers.
Yeah.
So the canola, rape, and the turnips, and what I think is the tillage radish when they're young, they sort of poked up and they seem to get a bit more of a go on, and the clovers just sort of popped that little cotyledon sort of out the surface at ground level, and it just sort of started turning white pretty quick.
Yeah.
That's what they're the ones that look like they were suffering the worst, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. We saw down here, it was only in very, very, very badly infested paddocks that we had to do something about a tillage radish or a turnip crop. There was some damage or some level of damage, but the worst affected were unfortunately where there was clover in that mix. Yeah, so similar. All right.
Yep.
We've got everyone in now, I think. Well done, everyone, for sorting out the technology. Thanks, Felicity, for sending a better link. So you can take your pick. Jade, who's
Who goes
next?
All right, we'll let Tyler wrap up his mixes.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't realise he had 4 mixes. Well done.
Yeah,
He's done
sorry.
a wonderful job this year. So,
Yes. So this one's pretty much identical to the other in terms of what's in there. It's except the addition of rye corn. This is a very poor soil type, and I just put the rye corn in there because it seems to go well in some poor soil types. I've backed the vetch rate off and increased the rate of the others, with the idea that they might need a bit more plants in there to establish on the poor soil type. And yeah, it's looking good, and I've been impressed with the the turnip, the leafy turnip or giant turnip, on the poor soil type. I know we've had a really good start to the season, so anything's probably going to go well. But yeah, I've been impressed with how healthy and leafy that looks on some of the, well, what I regard as a pretty poor soil type.
so anything in that mix that hasn't done very well on the poor soil type, Tyler?
No, it's all seemed to be going. It all seems probably, if I was going to, the clovers and lucerne don't seem to be there in great nut. Like they're there, but they're getting shadowed out.
Yes.
And probably choked out by the other larger, leafier plants. Yeah, just compared to the other soil, they're there. They just don't look as healthy. Like your rape and your tillage radish, they're there. They're just looking a bit more yellowish and probably not as big and vigorous, I guess. So I couldn't really make any more than that. But I was just under the assumption that the turnip being, well, turnip where they, the high rainfall dairy farmers and stuff seem to grow it. I was thinking it might be a bit more of a, I don't know, a softer type crop that needs to be looked after, but it seems to be going fine on the soil type, and some of the plants are quite big and leafy.
That's good, really good.
Tyler, have we got a soil test for that soil type? What is it exactly?
Oh, well, that soil type there, it's it's history. It's, if anyone knows it, it's just a paddock not too far from like the salt lakes are bought, and in the past, it's probably its main problem is that like sodicity and salt component of high water tables in years gone past, if that makes sense. Do I have an exact soil type? Probably not. Like soil test, not one without digging it up, but I don't have a recent test, if that makes sense. And
yeah, it might be a good one to do because it might be good to see what does grow well on that.
Yeah. Well, there's that the area there. The photo is obviously that's looking pretty good, but there's parts of the paddock that don't grow anything or are pretty bare. It just sort of cuts out and altogether, and sort of nothing grows there, just due to the salt history, I think.
Sure.
We've got Kyle and Bernie on there, but neither of them have got a microphone, I think. So they're just going to listen. And maybe they can use the chat function if they want to ask a question or give an answer, perhaps.
That sounds fine. Well, we'll who have we got? Oh, there we go. Sorry, Tyler, I fiddled you out of one more slide. So this is Tyler's thoughts or comments on the mixes. So they found the tillage radish pretty palatable, Tyler.
Oh, well, yeah, the sheep. I mean, the sheep seem to get into it, and once they get onto the fact that they can eat that root, they just seem to chop it off, and then it's dead, like it's terminated, if that makes sense. That's what happened to me. That's what happened last year, anyway. Whereas, so I just made an effort to make sure the sheep moved on a bit earlier, which is probably not a bad idea, and let them let everything reshoot. But yeah, obviously, and I have seen that comment on Twitter as well, with people grazing once the sheep get onto those turnip, the radish root. they seem to get into it.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any rule of thumb for that, Jade?
It really is just what Tyler said. So once they become accustomed to it, and it depends how prevalent it is in the mix a little bit as well, but as soon as they take the leaf off, it's time to move them on. So they will, there'll always be a few tillage radish that they just take a few bites out of the tuber as they're going through, and they'll probably cark it. But if the majority, you're starting to see the leaf disappear and they're getting down towards the tuber, and the tillage radish is dominant in the mix, and you want to keep it there, it's probably time to move on. So it really is just a monitoring practice. Sometimes it'll take them. I had a sheep farmer that he had ewes that had been on radish before, and they took 2 weeks, about 2 weeks to get onto it the first time, and then when he brought them around rotational grazing back onto that crop, they only took a couple of days and they were eating the leaves again. So it does depend a little bit how accustomed they are to it, and then it's just a monitoring game.
Is that why it's expensive? Is it seed expensive? Is that right?
It is reasonably expensive. I think, well, for AGF, I'm not sure about other companies, but it was because we were importing it from the US as a particular variety. I think other varieties are potentially less expensive, but it's still, per hectare, it will still be $20 or $30 worth of seed. Sorry, Kyle, but I couldn't quite download your photos in time, although Kyle did send me through some really good photos. He's got very strong establishment in his paddock, so it's quite good. So he's got a pretty diverse mix there: oats, wheat, vetch, lentils, steel peas, chickpeas, lupins, fava beans, smart radish, which is it is a form of tillage radish, but as far as I've been able to discover, it has more taproots than just a single tuber, so it branches out from more than one source, if that makes sense. And then he's got some volunteer barley. So that's about all I know on Kyle's mixes, whether he's able to phone in and tell us more or use the chat. But his pictures look very good and the establishment is good and the plants look healthy. So good job, Kyle.
I just wonder, is Kyle going to do any monitoring? Have you talked to him about that, Jade? If you're on there, Kyle, you could just use that little chat thing and answer if you want to.
I have to delve back into the mists of my memory for that one.
That's all right.
If we may have, but if not, if Kyle does want to do some monitoring, the things I do when I go on a farm, establishment counts, more than welcome to do. So I usually take just a 1 metre tape measure because it's pretty portable and you can roll it up afterwards, rather than carrying a big stick. So I count both sides of the 1 metre ruler, and I probably take 5 or 6 counts per paddock and throw, I don't know, a pen or something in front of me so it's randomised, and avoid any obvious outlying areas in the paddock, whether it's high biomass or low biomass. And that will give us some idea of the plants that have established, both the number and I usually keep just a quick check on what's dominant and what's not. And then dry matter cuts pre-grazing if possible. So just taking a quadrant of a known size, taking the plants down to ground level like your stock would, and weighing them. Then it depends on the equipment after that. If there's a drying oven or a microwave around, the microwave can get a little bit silagey. It can get a bit silagey in the kitchen if you're using your kitchen microwave, but it can dry down the samples. Or you can make some assumptions, say a 10% dry matter or a 15% dry matter and work out tons per hectare from that with the calculation. At the same time, you could probably do some feed tests as well. So If you again take the plants down to ground level and send off either a mixed sample of the whole crop or specific ones if you're so inclined, but usually a mixed sample is good because that's what the stock will be eating. And if you get those results back, it will give you energy and protein and your NDF and your soluble proteins and all those sorts of things that give you an idea of the quality of the feed. So once you have quantity and quality, you can work out how valuable that feed is to you. So that's from a livestock point of view. Other monitoring is the shovel is your best friend. So just going out there and digging around and seeing whether you've got worms or waterlogging, how smelly the soil is, whether it smells sweet, doesn't smell, or smells sour is a really good indication of what's going on. And how friable it is a really important thing. So often the difficulty of digging up your paddock gives you a really good idea of how you're going and whether you're progressing. And obviously the darkness of the soil. So if it's getting darker over time, we often attribute that to an increase in organic carbon, which is always a wonderful thing. So they're just an example of a few monitoring criteria that I would go through on a normal sort of paddock if I was doing a cover crop, just to see what's going on. And then obviously there's above ground beneficial insects as well. So just keeping an eye on whether there's any bees or moths or anything like that floating about too. So there's obviously a lot more monitoring that we can do, but there'd just be a few quick things to do.
Kyle just replied there.
Yep.
Does anyone see that? Or can everyone see that? Kyle says, I have this growing side by side with vetch monocultures. So yes, planning on trying to get an idea on dry matter grown, nitrogen fixed, etc.
Excellent.
And Jared's asked the question, what foliar spray after grazing? I think that was a little while ago. I might have missed it. So.
Yeah, we might have missed that one, I think. Jared, I'll give you a bell about that one if you like. I'm just making a note for myself. So
it's complicated here having people chatting and there's who's on the meeting. Anyway, so we've got Bernie. She also hasn't got a microphone. So Bernie, if you've got something to add, you'll have to quickly type it.
Okay, so Bernie and Gavin have done a lovely mix there of vetch, radish, Balanza clover, rape and barley. But that's about all I know at this stage.
Bernie, have you got anything to type? I think you might be still there. Yes, you are. I don't know if you can see if there's typing going on.
We might give Bernie a chance to type.
Yeah, Bernie a chance if she comes back.
We'll head back to the...
We've got Carl, I think, on board.
I've got a question for Tyler and his 4. Tyler, how many of those are irrigated?
Yep. So just the first two were irrigated mixes, and the second 2 are dry land. And honestly, I just wasted my money on the water. There's not much difference at this stage. I was just a bit late getting around to the irrigating side of things, but anyway, we just had a very good autumn start. So yeah, they're probably all on par. And if we having said that, if we have a dry spring, obviously the stuff that's had water is going to keep on steaming ahead.
Do you think you'll irrigate it again? Like, will you give it a spring if it's really dry?
If the water price allows, I would. Yeah, the plan would be to water it, but that'll also we only have about 550 breeding ewes and lambs. So depending on feed requirement for them and the water price, then yeah, I would consider if they needed the feed and the water price was favourable, I'd definitely give it a go.
And would you consider? Would you be considering putting a summer mix in any of those, whether they're irrigated or dry, like in after terminating?
Yep. Yeah. Hopefully this year, I'll be a little bit more organised with the air seeder ready to roll, and yep, that'd be something I'd be discussing with Jade later on once those crops ran their course, if that made sense. Then what options there might be to jam in there and give a go.
Right. Yeah.
There's also a question there from Kyle for Tyler. What was the planting date?
So the planting date was the last week of March for all of them.
And when did you irrigate, Tyler?
Oh, I'm gonna have to look, but it was right when we get that opening rains there, like right before that. It was in the 5 days pretty much before that 50 mil of rain we got, which I think was like near the 1st or 2nd of April. Was that? I'll have a look. Well, I'll come back to you. I'll have a look and come back to you if you want.
Thank you. That'd be lovely.
And there's a little, before we get on to Carl, there's a message here from Bernie. They've grazed theirs once. The barley was the first species the sheep went for. And like Tyler, the clover is not doing much, but sorry, I've just clicked off it. The clover's not doing much, but hopefully it will take off. We thought the sheep weren't too keen on the radish, but seem to have taken to it. It looks to be recovering well after grazing, and we'll put sheep back on next week, which will be a 3-week break from grazing. Wondering how to deal with thistles.
Good question. I'm by no means a chemical agronomist, but I don't know whether there's a lot of options with your broadleafs going over the top to take thistles out. Possibly if you bunch them up a little bit, you might be able to get them to eat the thistles, or hopefully the mix comes back strong enough that they compete with the thistles if they're not too high a component of the paddock mix, if that makes sense.
Grandchildren, maybe.
Hard labour burn. Alrighty. Do we have Carl there?
Yeah, I think so. Carl, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Would you like to give us a whirl through your photos here, Carl?
Right. It looks like you've got those ones up that are that was taken a while ago, and I sent you some new ones from today.
Yep, here they are here. So we'll do your establishment photos first, and we'll go through your recent ones.
Yep.
Later.
Yep. So it was all just blended together, and as per that ratio up there, and mixed and sown into a bit of self-sown barley. You can see there it sort of had a bit of a head start, so it was sown after that first breaking rain. So it all sort of established pretty well. There was bits and pieces of everything coming up along the way. I was going to take a photo. I forgot to of where I sort of ran out, and there's about 4 blows, and I just sowed vetch into that barley at the end, and just to see the difference between the multi-species and I suppose it's the barley and the vetch.
That's good though to have that.
That comparison.
Yep. So, and now the barley's sort of taken off. So if you drive past, it's just that little corner paddock beside the old man's place there. that self-sown barley's taken off, and the cows will go in there when they come back from the irrigation to calve. So they'll smash that down, and the heifers are in the other paddock that was sown as well, and it's more of a medic base, and they've sort of knocked it right down. But we'll probably just leave them in there because we like to try and manage their feed intake before calving.
Carl, did you notice any input pressure at sowing? Were there mites about, or did you?
It wasn't too bad. No, didn't notice anything, and the establishment sort of showed that there wasn't too much pressure there. Yeah. So there's a few readies out there now, though.
Right.
Yeah. There's a couple of pictures I took today where you can see some of the canola and that with the yellowing leaves. It's probably searching for a bit of nitrogen, I'd imagine. So that photo on the right, I think, has got a few yellow leaves. I don't know. Well, there's another one. Yeah, I suppose that's in where the barley's a bit more, a bit thicker. But it's starting to fill in and cover the ground. Now these ones are in the other. So the first two there are in the paddock that's being grazed at the moment. So there's actually a fair bit of medic in that one on the left. As you can see, the second photo shows a bit more medic, and it's been grazed. So it's a fairly hard sort of paddock. It's only a small paddock, but we usually carve our heifers there most years, just so easy access to the yards and stuff like that. And that third photo is actually from the first paddock, just a bit showing a bit more of the barley. Yeah, and that hasn't been grazed yet. Yeah.
There's just a little question from Jeff from Bromwich, and you just talked about having medic, and previously we talked about having clover. Are we talking clover as being medic? They're saying, I'm not sure why clover is being used in an alkaline soil environment, or is it actually medic that's being used?
So that's all medic in there, and that's just been there historically. So it's more of a pasture paddock that we've tried this blend into. So it's medic based.
I think actually they might have been talking about Bernie's paddock with clover, but do you know, Jade, was that clover or medic? A lot of people call clover medic. I mean medic clover. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll just get back to here.
It's got Balanza clover.
Yeah, I've got Balanza clover. So coming from the south, we're probably more. I'm more familiar with using Balanza or Persian Shafted rather than a medic. So that would be why I probably would have recommended that. But if you have medic available or existing in the paddock, by all means, either oversow it or use it if you've got some medic available and you think it would go better. Absolutely. I'll just do my...
Sorry for interrupting. And
no.
Tyler's just given us the date of the waterings. Which was the message is coming. Just looked at all the planting waterings. The first two mixes occurred between the 25th of March and the 1st of April, and then received 50 millimetres over the next week. And Bernie's saying ours is clover, much more productive than medic, especially on irrigation.
No, that was Tyler saying that.
Oh, sorry, that's Tyler. Sorry. Thanks for listening. Sorry, Carl, continue.
Yeah, so ours is all dry land, obviously.
Oh, just a quick question. Pre-grazing, these, I suppose, the second photo and then the right-hand side photo in your last page there. How far are you off grazing with the cow?
The cows are just down at the irrigation at the moment, so they'll be back probably at the end of the month to go in there for calving there.
Yep, beautiful. That's good. There'll be plenty of
You
feed in
heard
front of
about
them.
the cows getting down to the irrigation.
Sorry?
I heard about the cows getting down to the irrigation. That was on the last meeting.
Oh, yeah, they didn't want to go. Someone fired a shotgun down at the lake and they turned around, wanted to come home.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, we got them
Are
there.
you doing any monitoring?
Well, not a hell of a lot. No, I've just what I've had a look at today. Noticed there was a few red legs in there. One that had been grazed, and the one that hadn't. There wasn't any noticeable damage. There were the odd one around, but it seems to be chuffing along okay.
Are you doing any sort of growth or feed testing monitoring?
Oh, I hadn't been, no.
Okay. We might try and do some.
Right.
But I'm going to discuss with Jade how best to go about it. But anyway, that's good.
Yep.
Thank you.
No worries.
You're not spraying the red legs, is that right?
No, haven't. Won't be.
I think you're, even if there are a few red legs around in your yet to be grazed crop, I think the plants are at a advanced enough growth stage that they're not going to do much damage.
Yep. Yeah, there's probably enough, a few other beneficials around too, hopefully.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Carl. Brody.
I don't know that have we got Brody? Is that Brody? No, that's Jeff and Bronwyn. I'm not sure we've got Brody.
Okay, that's fine. So Brody's mix was pretty much the same as Carl and Doug's. These are photos from the 24th of May, so obviously the crop will be a lot more advanced than it looks there. I don't know whether Brody has grazed yet. Looking at the establishment there, everything looks quite healthy, and there doesn't, if I zoomed in earlier on the photos, doesn't look to be any red leg damage at that point. So I'd suspect that it's going okay, but I haven't had any recent photos. So, I'd say the mix is going along well, judging from those early photos, but I don't know any true detail.
Okay. I'll have to get on to Brody.
Yeah. So, Dan. We have Dan on board?
I don't think Dan said he was not going to be home in time again.
He isn't able to call in, Anne?
I think he's driving, so I probably won't.
We best not then. I can run you through Dan's, but I'm going to have to exit the PowerPoint, and there we go. So just come into my PowerPoint because he's done a reasonably big mix. So Dan has had 2/3 multi-species mixes. So he's got a dryland mix obviously, which has a few less species in it and is more suited to not being irrigated and a dry start. So he's got barley, oats, vetch, a little bit of clover and some raisin radish in that mix. And then we've got the irrigated mix, especially to beat some barley grass, which he was having issues with on his days. So that's a bit more of an aggressive mix with a few, I shouldn't say exotic species in, but perhaps species that require just a little bit more water there. So those were his mixes. So his irrigated mixes builds on the same base as the dryland mix, but it's just got some leafy turnip, a few peas, a little bit of rye corn, which, as we've heard mentioned today, gets up and moving pretty quickly, just in an attempt to beat that barley grass. I have got another mix below that, which is a little bit more exotic with some prairie grass and chicory and plantain in. I'm not aware whether he actually sowed that mix. So he has got 3 mixes there that he was intending to do, but definitely the irrigated mix and the dryland mix went in. I'll go back to my PowerPoint. So these are the photos he sent me through. So he has done Grant Sims mix or down under covers, and also he's done that homemade mix as well. So a pre-mix from Grant, and then some of those homemade mixes that I showed you in the Excel spreadsheet. So obviously he's got, I'd say that the photo on the right-hand side would be the dryland mix, and the big bouncing mixes on the left-hand side are the irrigated mix, but I'm only really guessing on that. So they're his mixes. We did talk about him doing some monitoring in terms of dry matter and feed tests, but I don't know whether he's up to the stage yet where he's done any of that. But looking at the establishment, especially of the 2 left-hand side mixes, he's obviously had no real issues there. All right.
Dan's actually just texted to say he couldn't get on, so I've just sent him that other link.
That's fine, cool. He might be able to add a little bit later if we come back around to him.
And there's a question from Bernie to say, will sheep eat plantain?
Yes, they will. Unless southern sheep are not as picky. There's
Sorry,
plenty
can you say that again?
Unless, well, in the south, we add plantain to, well, as a bit of a winter feed base in wetter areas, along with a bit of white clover and probably some phalaris in those wet areas. And the sheep really do enjoy the plantain. They don't eat it as much in summer when there's, ryegrass and in that type of mix, probably some cocksfoot going, but in the winter when it's flourishing, they eat it pretty regularly. It stays green, especially when it's wet. It stays green quite a long way into the spring, and they'll get quite a bit of feed off it down here in those sorts of situations. So yes, I think they'd have to get adjusted to it if they hadn't eaten it before, much like most other broadleaves, but they will eat it and do quite well on it.
Thanks.
That's okay. Jared.
I think Jared's here. Can you hear us, Jared?
Yeah, can hear you.
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, good. So we pretty much we planted 45 hectares of a summer cover into a medic barley sort of paddock with the background, and that's been pretty successful so far. The corn and the summer species frosted out, and probably the medics, the medic and the barley. The barley's coming out in head now, but the medic's sort of starting to really get going, and the tillage radish as well as the canola. was in that mix. And then we had a few on flood irrigation, I think sort of 3 paddocks really. One was a bit of a disaster. I sort of sowed it before that rain. I think it was in late March. We got 30 mils or something. And yeah, I sowed it then, and then I watered it, and then we got the 30 mils about 2 or 3 days later. That's pretty much a write-off now. But saying that, we did have some success with ones that sort of germinated on the rain, and then we watered after the rain. So yeah, as you can see in the photo there on the left, that's a really bad barley grass paddock, and I just literally just sowed out the seeder in about 3 days, and yeah, I couldn't believe the amount of feed that it produced from one watering in March. Yeah, and pulled the sheep out last Thursday, and that's the middle photo there. You can see that's where they that's roughly in the same spot, and yeah, the sheep just smashed it down. I did use an electric fence to try and increase the pressure, and yeah, that worked well. It did take the sheep a while because I only used a single wire. It did take the sheep a while to get used to it. There was a few disasters. They sort of ran straight through it at the start, and yeah, it did take a while for them to get trained, but eventually I could get it so all the ewes stayed in, and there was about 10 or 15 lambs that must have worked out how to go under or over or something like that. And then yeah, the photos on the right, so it's actually a different paddock, but that was one that we grazed before the one on the left, and so that was sort of the recovery photo after grazing, I guess, which I was pretty impressed with. Yeah, and then just the photo above it was sort of when I pulled the sheep out last time. So they really get into the tillage radish. They love it. They sort of rip it out of the ground and yeah, pull it around as much as they can. And yeah, the paddock on the right, there was some shepherd's purse that was sort of there on when it sort of came up, but I don't. It did get out, I think the cover crop out competed for a fair while, and yeah, I don't know, it's hard to find at the moment, but obviously there's marshmallows and a few thistles along the check banks and around trees and that kind of thing, but yeah, hopefully the sheep clean it up this time.
Excellent, Jared. Thank you. Fertiliser on that paddock?
Yeah, so that had 50 kilos of guano, which is just guano sulfur gold. So yeah, that was, it's just more of a slow release pea, I guess, compared to the synthetic fertilizers. And yeah, it seems to be successful so far.
Good. The colour of the fodder there looks pretty spot on to me, so it doesn't look like it's suffering from not having synthetic fertilizer, so that's really good.
I just sent a photo in the chat box if you want to have a look. It was pretty much literally nothing was different other than the seed on the right hand side from the winter mix from Grant.
Oh yes, yep.
And just look on the left how the shepherd's purse is sort of up and flowering, which is, I don't know, it might be a bit hard to tell, but it's that sort of white flowered one. And just the amount of that's mainly barley grass and a bit of clover. But yeah, you just look how well the cover crop competes, and I don't know, I thought it looked bloody healthy considering the situation it was in.
Absolutely. So I've just put that, hopefully everyone can see that, I've just pulled that up onto the main screen. If everyone can have a look at that. That's amazing.
Yeah, so literally the only difference there was the cover crop seed.
Yeah.
So that was pretty impressive from what I observed.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be wrapped with that. No, looks awesome.
And did you see Tyler's question? Any insect pest pressure, Jared?
There was a little bit, but I think it was just like we did water it pretty early. Like I think it did grow that fast. That any insect pressure that was there, I don't know, the temperatures were warm enough. It just seemed to be able to outcompete it. There is a bit of clover that's sort of coming back now. But yeah, there definitely was insect pressure at the start. But I just think, especially with the summer mix, we had buckwheat that sort of, we literally planted it and like the summer mix, and then 2 weeks later the buckwheat was flowering. And I think all that sort of stuff helps with the insect pressure, just sort of getting plants maturing at different times, I guess, to, so that if one thing's on the out, there's another one to sort of replace it.
Yeah. Are you planning to pop another summer crop in there, Jared?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely an option. I actually forgot to say I did sow a bit of the summer crop, or the summer cover, sort of must have been late March, before that 30 mils in a dryland paddock, and the amount of feed that's there compared to the vetch and canola that I sowed sort of after the rain and sprayed the barley out. You couldn't compare them at the moment. But
right. It would be interesting, and that's Jared, perhaps to do just a few dry matter cuts on that, if you're seeing a huge difference between the summer cover and your veg. Might be interesting to get some dry matter results from those two paddies.
Yeah, Jade did tell me to do that at the time, and we were sort of just flat out sowing at that time, and so it did get put on the back burner. The sheep just got thrown in, and that was the end of it. But I think I definitely should have done it, but time wasn't there.
Oh, we all have those days. No, that's fine. All right. Any other questions? Right. So I've just popped in, what are the dominant species in the mix in that photo, Jared?
That was, I should have had that, sorry. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was about 5 to 10. Hang on, I can probably grab it. There was about 1 kilo of tillage radish. There was some oats, triticale, and rye corn, and then there was some clover. There's about 12 in there. Sort of. Sorry, what was that?
Are there some safflowers in there, Jared?
There was, yes.
Oh, yeah.
There was a bit of safflower as well.
How did you have you grazed that?
Yeah, like that's the photo on the last slide.
Yes.
So I think it was the.
Oh yeah, right. Yep.
That middle photo, literally, that's what the paddock looks like now.
Yeah. Okay. And so they were quite. So did because we had a bit of safflower down here in some multi-species paddocks that went a little bit spiny.
Okay.
Did it do the same in your paddock?
A little bit, but I don't know. You can't find the plants now. I'm not sure whether they just trampled them or what happened. But
yeah, okay. That's good.
I should have taken a photo of the ground. They have trampled a lot, just sort of flat on the ground. So, but you literally can't see the ground.
That's good.
Yeah. So there still is a fair bit of cover there. It's going to be interesting how it recovers, especially with the amount of barley grass that was there.
I've just got a question. I don't know if anyone knows the answer, but has anyone tried using NDVI for measuring biomass in this sort of situation? Can you get an actual figure or just a picture?
Jade again. I did a little bit of NDVI stuff with some farm systems when I was working for them, and there is a handheld scanner you can use. But at that stage, I was just doing, well, the trial was set up for monocrops, basically. We were doing barley and wheat crops. So my initial thought would be, yes, you probably could, but I don't know whether the multi-species aspect of the mix would make a difference or not. I'm not sure. Anne.
Yeah, I just thought it might be a
Might be
backward
easier.
to look at how much biomass there was there before grazing.
Yes, it's definitely worth looking into. Yeah.
Is there an option to use that, I don't know, pastures from space or something like that? I haven't had a close look at it, but it's just popped into my head.
Yeah, well, that's sort of the same thing, I think.
Yeah.
I might I'll probably have a little bit of time Friday. I might just do some investigating.
And Jared was asking about foliar sprays. So Jared, now that the sheep are out there, you are planning on either top dressing or spraying some further nutrients onto that paddock to help it recover before the sheep go back in again? Is that the plan?
Yeah, sorry. That probably would be the plan. I just haven't got around to it at the moment. It's probably still a few weeks away, unfortunately. But yeah, I was just wondering what sort of the best attack is to go from here after that sort of grazing pressure. I wasn't really sure what to do, to be honest.
Are you planning on keeping on the less synthetic side of things, Jared?
Probably.
Or
Yeah,
not
it won't have any granule urea, I wouldn't have thought. I might have some dissolved urea or I wasn't really sure what to do. I was just seeing what everyone else thought was the best attack.
And what's the paddock like for fertility, just as a baseline?
I don't know for certain, but it's sort of a long-term pasture paddock, so I'd imagine fertility is normally fairly good in those paddocks.
Yeah. It's an interesting question because if the paddock is relatively fertile, not that we want to mine nutrients, but there's a few dairy and beef sheep guys on some of the more fertile country down here that they've sort of started off the same way as you in terms of backing off a little bit on the synthetic ferts, and they've got to the top dressing stage, and some of them have kept on going in a biological manner, and some of them have reverted to synthetic. So this is the first year that that's happened in the paddocks that I've been looking at. So I don't really know the results yet because they're only really up to that stage now. So I think it comes down to your gut instinct there. There's people down here that are just putting on some sort of worm tea and a little bit of trace minerals and things like that, and there's some that are going back to spraying urea and a bit of potassium, potash and all that sort of stuff. So I think it depends on how you judge the crop is bouncing back and what your gut instinct is on what the paddock can give you and what the crop looks like. So sorry, can't be of more help.
So you're saying if the plants that are growing back sort of look a healthy green, that maybe just leave it and see what happens?
I would, depending though how much you need the feed. If it's growing back and you've got feed in front of you and you think you might not be pushed, I'm not explaining that very well. So if you've got feed in front of you and that paddock, it's not crucial for it to overwhelm you with its response in terms of bouncing back, and you just need a couple of tonne of it for the rest of the year, then I'd wait and see. If you really need that feed coming back really fast, then I'd probably fertilise in some way, but I'd wait and see if you don't need that paddock to be super productive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Thank you.
You had some legumes in there too, though, didn't you?
Yeah,
There would
no,
be,
it's
yeah.
I guess there is, yeah, definitely, like there's lentils and vetch, and then there's a clover in the background. Yeah, I guess.
So if you top dressed them, would that reduce their activity as far as nodulation and stuff? Does anyone know the answer to that?
It would make them lazier, yes. They'd get by on apply nitrogen rather than scavenging for their own, if that makes sense.
How are we going for time? I said 6:30 and it's now 10 to 7. So
Yes.
we try wrapping it up by 7.
Certainly. Let's see. Actually, we probably are not too far from the end. Let me just see if I can see on.
While you're finding that, I've talked to Jared and he's agreed that the group will come and have a look at what he's doing on his farm in possibly our next meeting. Maybe do you think that's a good time? I'm thinking beginning of or mid-July, something like that, as a non-isolation meeting.
Lovely.
Does that sound okay with you, Jared?
Yeah, I'll just whenever suits everyone else, I guess. And whether I guess people are going to be interested and want to attend, I guess it's the main thing.
Yeah, sure, but it'd be good to have a look at someone's, I suppose, cover crops while they're in their glory, I suppose. Anyway, I'll arrange that. Jade, have you got more?
No, that's
covered everyone, have we?
Yeah, unless I've missed somebody, and if you're online and I have, please pipe up. But I think I've covered everyone, so that's about it. So we could have a 5 minutes for questions if anyone's still got a question they need to ask.
I'm just going to tell you that Darren also wrote a comment about farmers around Ravenswood, south of Bendigo, sow plantain as part of their pasture mix. So it's not as dry and it's probably not as alkaline, but sounds like they're using it there.
It has got a lovely big, well, when you're looking at it next to chicory, they've got a similar root system. So plantain's a lovely deep taproot, and it does extract minerals from the subsoil. So once it's established, it's quite hardy. It does like a little bit more water than chicory tends to like, dips and valleys and those sorts of areas. But once it's established, I think it is quite tough. So it might be worth a little bit of a try.
So if you've got a question and you don't have a microphone, just put it on the chat. Or if you've got a microphone and you want to ask a question, if someone's already talking, just use that little hand to put your hand up and then we'll get to you. Anyone got a question?
Where's the hand, Anne? What hand are we talking about?
Oh, on the menu. So if you sort of click on the middle of your screen, the menu should come up. And it's got a little hand in the menu.
All right. Oh, well, I can't see it, but I'll ask you a question if that's all right.
Yeah, go.
Jade, most of us probably listening to this are probably, many of us are predominantly cropping, like broadacre cropping in quite large paddocks, and probably our main income is from that hay grain produced on those large paddocks. And most of the discussions, and potentially, like particularly our situation, is growing these mixed species on small paddocks that we can rotate sheep on and off and whatnot.
Yes.
Have you got any experience or seen it played out in larger scale of moving these mixed species pastures onto a large scale in, like, your 400 acre type paddocks or 200 acre type paddocks, and then rotating it through a cropping rotation? Does that make sense? And is there anything we need to be careful of doing, or having issues with carryover of, tillage radish hard seed or anything like that? Because at the moment, I think we're just growing them on small scale and small paddocks. But what do we need to think about when we're branching out to put onto 100 hectares or 200 hectare paddock, and rotating it through a wheat barley rotation or something like that? If there are chemical residues and stuff we need to be extra careful of that we might be using that are going to be highly sensitive to some of this stuff. That type of thing. Just seeing if you had any experience.
All right. So there's probably two approaches that I've seen done. So one of them is more companion cropping. So using, say it's wheat, using that cereal base as your main crop, and then adding in at a relatively low rate some brassicas and some legumes. So similar to what you guys do with your cereals and veg, but a little bit more diverse, but ensuring that you can spray out your broadleaves without really impacting on your main crop. So it's just probably increasing the diversity of that veg cereal part of the rotation. So that's one way to do it. They do say that particularly things like peola, which is obviously peas and canola, that they hyper yield a little bit. If there's the tech about with the colour sorter or seed sorter, there are people, I know there's a farmer in South Australia that harvests multi-species crops at one time. So that companion cropping is one way to do it. I suppose the other in terms of doing it is doing a green manure. That might be how I would approach it first, is doing green manure, diverse cover crop as your break crop for your traditional rotation. So putting together, and that would depend on the paddock and where you're slotting it in to your rotation as to what mix I'd probably come up with. But doing a diverse mix and either mulching it in or slashing it or doing something that lays it down flat a little bit so that it then goes down, drops down into your soil. So they're probably the two approaches I'd start with. As for chemical residues and stuff, the chemical side of things is not my area of expertise. So I'm going to have to, I think you would be better off speaking to a chemical or a commercial agro on that side of things, because they'll have much more up-to-date knowledge than I do. Hopefully that's helped.
Jared wants to speak, and there's also a message from Kyle. I'll just read Kyle's first before you, Jared. Kyle says, mine is 260 hectares and I'm planning on strip grazing and terminating at first flower into canola next year. So basically use as a brown manure with some feed value.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, the other part of that question was hard seeding it. So the tillage radish isn't hard seeded. So when I was with AGF, we used to send off lab tests every year, especially on the tillage radish, because we were aware that it has that connotation with wild radish, which is quite hard seeded. But the tillage radish doesn't have any hard seeds, or that's what the lab tests have shown us. And I have seen that if termination is timely, there's no real issue. And I think that that's the same with most of these cover crop species that we're using, these annual species, is that if you do catch them at flowering or definitely prior to seed set, that they're not too much of an issue going forward. So as long as it's the spray or the graze or however you're going to terminate it and is in a timely fashion, you shouldn't have too much bother.
We've got Jared. Do you want to ask a question, Jared?
Yeah, I was just wondering, Jade, do you know much about sort of the nitrogen fixing bacteria or the bacteria that releases phosphorus, or sort of disease control from bacillus or trichoderma? Have you sort of had much to do with that sort of stuff yet, especially in wheat and barley?
So there's sort of three parts to that question. Can we go back to the first one, Jared? Is that okay? So
Go for it. Sorry, I just thought I'd put it all out there.
You're right. No. So sorry. The first part was.
Oh, just the nitrogen fixing bacteria.
Okay, cool. So there's two different types. I've been listening to Christine Jones a bit, and there's obviously your rhizobium interface that hosts its own bacteria, but Christine says that in a grass dominant system, as long as they're perennial healthy grasses, there is a certain amount of free living nitrogen fixing bacteria which aren't associated with rhizobium. So if you have a legume in the paddock, that's fantastic. But if you have a long-term pasture paddock, you should have a certain amount of free living nitrogen fixing bacteria as well. So it depends a little bit with your cover cropping paddock as to whether you've come from a long-term pasture paddock that you're taking into cropping, or whether it's been a cropping paddock for a long time. I think that would depend a little bit, or that would make the decision as to what you put in the mix a little bit clearer. So you could probably, if you're coming out of a long-term pasture paddock and putting it into a cover, and you for some reason didn't want to put a legume in it, or there was some reason why you didn't, you could probably get away without it. But in a long-term cropping paddock, I would think you would need some type of legume in there as a start off to boost your nitrogen fixing, if that makes sense. Is that sort of where you're going with that one? Jared,
Jared, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was sort of where I was getting. I was just wondering, like, is there? I've sort of had a little bit to do with the bacillus and the trichoderma in terms of spraying it on or applying it to the seed. But I was just wondering, with the nitrogen fixing bacteria, is that something you can sort of do as well? Like, can you spray it onto a crop, or is it more something that has to be in the soil already?
I think my approach to either adding bacteria or bugs to the soil and boosting what you already have, I would probably prefer to boost what you already have. When we're talking about spraying, especially, well, either in spore form or live forms of biology, it can be pretty difficult, A, to keep them alive, or in stasis, depending on what solution or form they're in. And then I often wonder whether we wouldn't just be better off doing whatever we can to boost what we already have in our soil, because the potential for amplification of that biology that's already existent in most soils is huge, whereas spraying it on may be a short-term benefit, but I would think there would be a lot more long-term gain in activating the soil from the start, if that makes sense. So I think you'd have a bigger effect activating your own soil.
Yeah, so I guess where I was going is like spraying this sort of stuff on. Does it help activate what's in the soil, or does it? Is it just a bit of a long-term thing? You just have to wait for it to happen.
I think it's a long-term thing, but there's no real, well, I don't think as yet, well, I haven't come across them, but there's scientific studies that have been done, you know, spraying these on versus side by side with activating the soil microbiome that's already there. It won't hurt your paddock to spray it on, but I think putting, you know, your guano and worm teas and things like that are going to feed your biology, I think that would be more effective than putting biology on.
Yeah, okay. No, thanks for that.
Later on in the year, I think August, we're going to have David Hardwick, and I think he's also quite good at talking about those types of things. Is that correct, Felicity?
Yes, Anne. Yeah, David Hardwick is very good at talking about that sort of bacterial biological activation, and when he also will talk about fungi and nematodes, and he gives a really great explanation about that balance and what might be dominant over, you know, and how you might be able to encourage one type of bacteria or fungi over another, and that sort of thing. So and he mixes up, so he makes compost and he mixes up you know, teas, lactobacillus teas and things like that. So it's a little bit out there, but you can at least listen and learn and see what you think. I think he's also running a compost making free webinar on Thursday morning, which Vic No-Till have organised with Wimmera CMA. So check out the Vic No-Till website if you're interested in compost making.
Just on the side here, Kyle's just posted a photo of his crop. And Bernie, we were just talking about David Hardwick. We've got him lined up to come in August. So he's talking about all sorts of different fertilisers, but he's also doing a soil biology hands-on sort of workshop with us. So put the 12th of August in your diary. And Kyle, are you sharing that, Kyle's photo?
Sorry, can you all see that bigger photo? So I'm just sharing it through my screen. Is that beneficial?
Yeah, sort of.
That's the mum. That's
I think he's just shared another one.
all right. Hold on. Really good stuff though. You've been.
He hasn't started grazing yet. No.
No.
It's starting to get a bit late, and I'm thinking we might wind it up. But we've got, well, I've got to put a plan together for the coming year. So I've got some ideas from some of you, and but I think there's lots of questions out there. So if you can text me or call me with your ideas in the next couple of weeks, then we can try and sort out as a group what we want to prioritise. And I think, Jade, have you got anything to add? I want to start doing some monitoring. I'm still up north, but I think in July I'll be back and maybe can organise some monitoring of some of those paddocks and perhaps some more soil testing, because I haven't done all of them.
Yes. I think that's definitely the next step, and it will give the group a lot of information about how valuable the mixes are, I guess, in terms of if they're using them for livestock grazing, how much quality they have in them, how many grazing days that gives them in terms of the biomass, all those sorts of things. And then there can be economics run on that, because X amount of tons of dry matter at X quality equals exporting feed, if they're feeding livestock. And if it is going to go into a cropping rotation as a brown or a green manure, it's also good to know the quality of what you're potentially turning into soil if you're talking about it in a cropping rotation. So I think monitoring them is definitely the next step. It'll give the group a lot of good data.
And from the point of view of the project, is that baseline, you know, starting point of, you know, perhaps what the soil health or soil quality might be like, and if we're gaining some improvements in water infiltration or soil carbon or nutrient cycling and nutrient availability, especially like Tyler's saying, to, you know, increase nitrogen for the next crop or whatever that might be, then that's, from our point of view, would be good too.
Absolutely, positive, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for persisting and getting on. I'm sorry about my dodgy link that I sent. So some people managed it and some people didn't, I think, but I'll be more careful next time I send it. And thank you, Jade, for your fabulous input and getting everyone going. And we'll try and sort out some monitoring in the next few weeks.
Lovely. No, thank you all for having me.
A few little messages there, but I think we might just say, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And if you've got some ideas for me, please ring through or email or something.